Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today on August 24th, 2023, bringing you all the news you can use this week. And I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm. And joining me today for the conversation is my co-host and colleague, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, it's a beautiful sunshiny day outside. We're getting ready to head into a lot of ongoing conferences and events in the next couple of weeks. Kids are back to school. It's kind of getting busy. So maybe you can fill us in on all of the exciting news from the HR tech side and all the boiling hot tea that maybe everybody's starting to talk about.
Yeah, you're right. There is a lot going on. As you said, kids are going back to school. There's just things happening, and it's no different in the world of HR tech. There is some news. We've got everything from companies expanding how they're doing business. We've got news from Oracle. We've got news from Namely, from Paradox, from ZipRecruiter, UKG, Deltek, Replicon. It goes on and on. I'll admit some from organization I'd not heard of, howdy.com, but I always love to say that. So let's go with it. And then, of course, because it's a huge topic, we're going to have some time to talk about AI and where that is in the news right now. And if we have some time, we'll also talk about some breaking news that we've seen on Zoom, now that all of us kind of work in that hybrid world. So where do you want to start? Shall we talk about Oracle?
It kind of sounds like alphabet soup, don't you think? You got C's, you got W's, you got the whole mix in there. I'm like, we could probably line those up and do it alphabetical. But yeah, I think the news from Oracle is probably the most interesting that probably got overlooked by a lot of people. They had a really interesting announcement come out about Oracle achieving top secret cloud authorization. Cliff, what does that mean? I mean, you had a chance to look at what that looked like for them. Is that something that people should be aware of?
It is. It wouldn't seem that way, I think, at first, because you'd just be like, okay, well, I don't work in those worlds. But what it does is gives them access to a whole lot of other organizations that they can work with, right? Pretty much anything government related or defense, right? So your Lockheed Martins, your Department of Defense, any of the intelligence community, it gives them the ability to work with them and use their information in the cloud, right? They have the security clearance so that those companies can take advantage of modern HCM capabilities in the cloud, which can only really improve the lives of a whole lot of workers. Number one employer is the US government, at least here in the United States. So very cool stuff for both those employees and for Oracle.
Yeah, I had a couple of conversations on this topic this week. I have a good friend who works over at one of the larger learning management systems in the market. And one of the reasons that organization has some of the older systems that they keep around and keep leveraging and keep using is because those are some of the systems in the market that have some of this high-level top security clearance because they're doing work with the Department of Defense or they're doing work with high-level security from a government perspective. These kind of clearances, although there are different levels for cloud levels versus sort of systems versus applications, but these kind of overall authorizations really make a big difference if you're anyone who not just works like in the Department of Defense or in the government, but if you work for them as well. So if you're someone who has to handle information, maybe for the DoD in one way or another, if you do training for them, if you provide even food services for them, because where they're going to be at, those kind of things, that means that you have to have a lot of your material and your information kept top secret. And having family members who are in the service and very proud of the work that they do every day, I know that security clearance is hard won. So it was interesting to see some of the conversations that Oracle put around this. I like the one paragraph, I think it's worth kind of reading off, is they've got a fully redundant and geographically dispersed data centers, and Oracle National Security regions are secured to the highest U.S. government classification levels for top secret SCI workloads and are supported by government cleared U.S. citizens. That's really critical, right? When you think about the amount of companies who also have contractors who work inside of those organizations, some of the biggest risks we've had in our defense departments has been people themselves, not even the technology or the concern about being hacked, but people who either had bad processes or who took content or information outside of the systems. And so this is interesting. I think well worth kind of noting as you're kind of thinking about your architecture, your infrastructure, and how all your systems work together.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it ties into the ability to do more remote work. It also touches on some of these things, generative AI and where that information is going and the ability to use some of those tools, which we'll talk about later. But it's and it's very rare. You and I were talking in the green room beforehand, and there's only maybe, 2 or 3 other sort of large HCM providers who have this level of clearance, meaning that there's just not much to choose from. And it just shows you how hard it is to get that.
Yeah,
so
it's
very cool.
A lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of different regulations and how that affects companies and their ability to do businesses in other places, Namely has started getting into doing global payroll. So they've added global payroll support. They have a lot of partnerships, a very extensive partner program, including Employ, Jazz HR, Human Interest, Mineral, Vestwell. But now they are going to be able to support global payroll, which is huge. And again, it's not as simple as doing currency conversions, right? There's different regulations, there's different environments and different rules that you have to follow and be aware of, because it really ties in also to some time and other requirements. So that's pretty neat and really cool to see. We've worked with Namely for a long time. So
yeah, Namely, and it's probably worth noting that it'll be interesting to see sort of how all this plays out. But Namely was acquired in 2022 by Venture HR, which also had Prism HR. You might know that software as well. And so you see the Namely acquisition by Prism HR. I'm not exactly sure how all that plays out, but basically they were jointly owned with different sort of private equity firms and stuff. And that just recently happened. And there's I think, going to be some interesting things as Namely starts to sort of, it's got a good brand name in the market. It did a lot of investment in marketing. And the tool itself was a pretty practical, basic sort of small business HR application tool. But my expectation is that with the acquisition, the investments they're probably going to get through that 2022 decisions that were made and who they're merging with, that you're going to see a lot more of these kind of things come out in the news about what they're doing. And it's probably worth paying attention to if you're in the SMB space as to what that's going to look like, because it's really critical that people sort of understand sort of that it's not just about the system itself, it's also who they're partnered with. And in many cases, that's also what umbrella they're owned under, right? The other companies that Venture owns that's also providing is Employ with Jazz HR and Mineral with Vestwell. Like there's other partner programs that they're connecting with. And I think it's worth kind of just watching all of this, right?
Yeah. Another great one to watch actually is Paradox. If you don't know Paradox, I don't mean you, Stacey, of course you do, but anyone else, they're new. They've been only around for about 7 years, but they have been making the news because of their growth, 720% in the last 2 years. They made the Inc. 5000 for the third time. Just recently, that news came out. And what they do is use AI, I think in the more traditional sense of AI, not the generative, but the sort of chat features and the conversational AI during the hiring process, right? So that helps that kind of first and maybe second levels of engagement during the recruitment and hiring process, where you may just be reaching out, want to get to the most candidates you can, but also answer their questions and have that automation. So they also recently announced that they are Workday certified for their scheduling automation integration with Workday recruiting. So that probably is a part of that growth being attached to a larger company like that. So it's pretty interesting just because, for one, I love to see AI it's a kind of catch-all term, but this is really what I think of it in its most traditional sense, right? And something that is sort of acting like a human, but just doing basic tasks.
I had this conversation yesterday with an organization, which is that I think where the artificial intelligence is, I think we had so much over the summer with ChatGPT, but when people start to see some of the data come out from our survey this year, I think you're going to find there's a difference between sort of hype versus what you're willing to pay for and what you're willing to invest in, right? And what we're seeing in our data already is that things like this, which are more process automation, reducing the amount of workloads, that becomes really valuable because it's time saving and it's automating places that it's not rocket science to some extent, right? Which is what the new artificial intelligence conversation has been about. Well, it's going to change the world. Sometimes it's just actually taking what we're doing and doing it better is good too, right?
Yeah.
And this is a really good example of that. And I think it'll be interesting. The 720% growth, I'm always, anytime somebody gives that big of a growth, I always kind of give a side eye at it. But we do know this has been a big topic, especially since 2020. I'm assuming they were very small in 2020.
Right.
But I do like seeing that people are starting to realize that AI should be sort of looked at through the lens of the right sort of infrastructure, the right place where it actually does the job that makes the most sense for it right now, right?
Yeah. In fact, we're going to talk about that a little later in some of the uses of AI. But, kind of still going, we just mentioned that partnership with Workday. Another big partnership is still in the recruiting space, and you'll have to forgive me. This is what happens when I came out of the RPO world, but I'm always fascinated by these companies. So ZipRecruiter announced partnership with UKG. And again, streamlining the sort of hiring space is what they're looking to do. So UKG has I will say, massive sort of partner network, but ZipRecruiter is big. If you listen to podcasts like us, you've probably heard ads for ZipRecruiter. So they're really making a name for themselves, not just through their ads, right, but also through their application. And, I think this is a smart move to get into a company like UKG, even if it is a sort of large marketplace. I think by being distinct and just giving more options and having the capabilities that they have, makes a nice sort of in partnership, in my opinion.
And I think it emphasizes, the investment we're seeing by all these larger companies who serve oftentimes larger businesses in that SMB space, because ZipRecruiter is oftentimes seen as more of an SMB play for recruiting. We see it in our data. It's one of the tools that often comes up, and we have some data on each year on user experience vendor stat. Usually gets pretty decent ratings by the small business market. And I think we're going to see more investment in that SMB space as people start to really look at where are the green fields in the HR conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And this time, not a partnership, but a full acquisition. Deltek completes its acquisition of Replicon. Replicon does time tracking most famously. I know they do a little more in project management, delivery, finance, but having that all on kind of the larger platform, Deltek's, which is a kind of more enterprise HR software and project management. I will say that I was a little surprised when this first broke. Now that it's been completed, it makes sense. But I would have thought it would have gone the other way just because I'm more familiar with Replicon, that they would have acquired Deltek. But it does kind of make sense, especially having the sort of project management side mixed in with time tracking. Extremely important, and never more so than in today's more world where there's more reliance on gig workers, contingent workers, hybrid models, things like that. So I think that positions themselves well to sort of break into more of the business side of time management rather than just sort of tracking hours for compliance or regulations. So,
which is huge because Deltek's been growing focused and growing brand in that, and not just in the project but in the businesses that need project, right? Like that's the distinction. I think the difference between Deltek and what you're seeing maybe with some other tools out in the market is that they're really trying to figure out if you are a business that depends on project management and how you get your work done, right? That's what I think Deltek is trying to sort of be the right tool for that kind of an organization, which goes back to, I think, something it's an important conversation to have about workforce management, time management systems, which is that they're the one tool, I think, across all of the HR applications that are really tied to the industry itself, because it all comes down to the operational level of the work. And so in this particular case, Replicon, and it kind of where you were heading with the work that they do on the business side of things, makes it a really valuable tool for someone like Deltek. But on the flip side, the next conversation that we were going to be talking about, which is the howdy.com acquiring Brazilian talent marketplace Geekhunter. I'll let you explain that whole thing because that is a mouthful to even say, but I thought I'd try and say it for you. But focus on AI engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this idea that by industry and by critical job role, we're going to start to see distinct HR technologies forming around those areas. There's always been some of that. I think we're going to see more of it now as people really want to look towards a more personalized business environment, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, the story you mentioned, howdy.com, which is a tech recruiting website. So specialized really in tech and especially in looking into Latin America. Acquired Geekhunter, which was the largest sort of recruiting platform or recruiting site for Brazil. So what was driving this is that both companies have just seen a huge demand, a surge in demand for workers with AI and machine learning skills. And now positions howdy.com. And again, no shame if you've not heard of them. I will admit I hadn't either, even though they're out of, I think, Austin, Texas. And now makes them one of the biggest players for hiring tech people out of North and South America. So pretty impressive. When it's a lot of software development that, in engineering, I'm recognizing a lot of these software sort of ones like Ruby on Rails, Python's pretty large, Angular, all these type of things that are really in demand in AI and sort of changing how the workplace goes. But I think this leads into a really interesting article we both saw that was a great title, 2/3 of employers rethinking role of HR with rise of AI. I mean, that's catchy, right? That's what we've been talking about. We have a
little bit of clickbait there.
Yeah, no doubt. You're like, wait, I'm losing my job? So there was people management software provider Advanced. They did a survey and they said 3 in 5 HR professionals think AI will have a positive impact on how HR operates. But PwC said nearly 2/3, 63% of organizations are rethinking the whole role of their HR department because of the entrance of AI in workplaces. So what this, as you said, sort of clickbaity title made it sound like they're being replaced. But what's really happening is what we have been saying since, February or March of this year, in that it just means the role will evolve. And they are talking about what they're calling AI evangelists, which are the people who sort of oversee the HR role that oversees AI within it. So not just checking in for regulation, but also promoting or finding new ways that these programs can help improve productivity, reduce errors, tons of different applications. We've already talked about a few, and we have in the past too. There's these companies that are growing and expanding because there's just new roles being built out. And I think a few months ago, we used the analogy of the Industrial Revolution. You went from sewing, you didn't lose your job, you just went to running an automated loom, right? You had to learn those skills. So it's interesting. A bit of, I would say paradox, but if you talk about them as a company, I mean it in the term. But that means that there's a group of HR professionals who will need to become more technically savvy in how the sort of STEM skills necessary for understanding and managing AI programs, but also probably a greater focus on soft skills, right? If some of these other things are taken over and a lot of the automation finally happens that we've been thinking would happen through AI and machine learning and those types of programs, then the real skill of kind of maybe a reason a lot of us got into HR, connecting with people, understanding, really listening to people, figuring out ways to overcome problems, deal with stress, those kind of skills I do think the role of HR is changing. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it should something we should be aware of.
I mean, I get all of it. I think we've talked about it. I think it's all important conversations to have, right, in the AI space. The thing I think I just push back a little bit on is this sort of 63% of organizations are rethinking the whole role of AI. But when we know from our data that less than 50%, like 40% or less, right, even have a plan in place to ethically manage AI, I don't think you're going to want to maybe rewrite the entire HR handbook based off of how AI is going to basically do HR for you, right? But yes, I do think that it's going to evolve the market and evolve the jobs and the roles over time. But I just think we've got to, again, be a little bit more realistic about the fact that it's taken us quite a while to get to where we are at today. And I do think that you should never put your head in the sand, and you should always be looking forward and understanding the technology and be in front of it. But let's not try and do things with it that we shouldn't do yet, like trying to help people understand what level of bereavement leave they have when you can't understand what bereavement maybe really is, those kind of things. So yes, I get where it's all coming from. I'm a little bit hesitant to jump in completely with both feet first.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've lost the job of AI evangelist, it sounds
I know. I'm sorry. I'm not going to get there.
But at the same time, I would like to tell the listeners that of all the tea that's been spilled, that might have been the hottest. What you just heard was a result from our most recent HR system survey. And I believe that's the first time that has been released publicly. Most of the data will be announced at HR Tech, all the really big findings. So you guys, I don't know if she meant to let it go, but you just got some of Auntie Stacey's secret tea stash from the back. But that is one of the big sort of cool and interesting tidbits that we've seen from the survey in the early sort of data reveals as we've closed that down now, is just what she said, that well less than half of companies have a plan in place to manage AI ethically. And I think, if you want to be ahead of the curve, maybe start thinking about how it's done in your organization and who is in charge of that and what is your plan. So.
It should definitely be on your radar, right? The more we say it, maybe the more it'll get there, right?
But yeah, this whole idea of different roles. They mentioned the HR or the AI evangelist, but we talked to a company called PeopleRain, I think earlier this week, and they do a lot of, amongst other things, just sort of automation, HR help desk. And for very large companies, they use AI in, as we said before, in the traditional sense of, okay, you have a question, let's figure out how to route you to the correct person who can solve that problem for you, whether you need to figure out something with your benefits or you need to figure out time off, you need to submit a complaint, anything, right? It can sort of figure that out, route it, but there's a whole new role that Stacey had brought up. It's like, well, who's in charge of figuring out if that worked so that the machine can learn, right? That's the whole idea of machine learning. You say, yeah, that was the right person, correct. Do that next time and manage all of these databases and all these frequently asked questions. That's a role that comes in and sort of oversees that program and says, okay, let's do checks, let's audit the system, let's check it for security, let's make sure that sensitive information isn't there, all the other things that can happen. So that was pretty interesting, just thinking about how there are roles coming up that we may not even thought of that are involved.
Yeah, management for your AI, right? Like I think I think sometimes people think you can just let, like any technology, just let it go and it does its job. But any HRIS professional will let you know that your current HR technology is nothing like it was 5 years ago. Yeah, it's been tweaked, turned, edited. It's like a house. Is there one piece of wood that was original? Maybe not, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. Yeah, and it's interesting because when we were talking to PeopleRain, we talked to a couple other companies in the last week too, and we can talk about that. But it's more that people aren't aware of the tools that are out there, and that there are sort of maybe not new problems, but new considerations all the time, and that there are companies forming just as fast to help manage those considerations and help out with these sort of things. That it's like, oh, I didn't know there was a company that did that sort of thing.
I think that so the two other briefings that we had over the last couple of weeks, we spoke with Velocity Global, which is, we talked about in the previous week, which is an employer of record company, right? Mm-hmm. Just started out in 2016. The employer of record is such a new term. We've talked about it a couple of times on the show. But that, like, who would have thought, I think even 10 years ago, the idea of hiring international employees, there was a lot of challenges with that, a lot of reasons why people just didn't do it, right? Until we came up with some of these new models that came out in the market. And someone like Velocity Global, who was bigger than we realized they were, right? I got some new and updated information from them when we were speaking with them. Again, it amazes me that if you step back from our industry and look at it in a whole, that the industry I stepped into in 2000 when I got out of college, right? And started on my journey and path, is so different from where it is today, 23 years later, right? And I think almost every 5 years, it kind of reinvents itself to some extent. So I don't think you need AI to do that in some fashion, right?
No, you're exactly it. And then the other company we talked to was Cloud Connectors, right? That do HR data integrations. And that's another one, right? Is all of this information is coming through and it's really becoming a datafied job, being able to have that information and have those integrations of data between your systems, because that's the only way any of these processes work, right? Especially anything in AI and machine learning. What's sort of what's garbage in, garbage out, but also if it's gourmet in, then it's gourmet out, right? So I don't think that's how that saying goes, but I'm working with it.
I think it is. Well, it's a good way. It's a good analogy to put there, I think, for someone who focuses on integration, because it is all about the data that goes in, and a good integration platform that understands the business of HR might make the difference between sort of using an off-the-shelf one that doesn't, so that your terms and your formats and your matching approach doesn't work as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I know we're getting towards the end of time, but one story that you and I were talking about, and I would love to discuss just a little bit, because it's one that you may have seen, the listeners may have seen or heard, which was a story about Zoom, which was another fairly clickbaity one, because most of the headlines were like the one that I'll put in the show notes, that the Zoom CEO says employees need to be in the office because it's hard to build trust over Zoom, right? Very sort of clever little headline there. And I was kind of laughing about it. And Stacey, you had brought up a good point, but I'll make my case here that his quote, that this is the CEO said, over the last several years, we've hired so many new Zoomies, that's their employees, that it's hard to build trust. We cannot have a great conversation. We cannot debate each other well, because everyone tends to be very friendly when you join a Zoom call. And it does sound sort of, wow, there's that word again, paradoxical, right? That you're a video conferencing company and you're telling people that that's not a good way to work. But you pointed out that's not really the whole story, right?
Not. I mean, first of all, it's not like he's saying everybody's got to come back in or you lose your job, which we've seen happen at a couple other businesses. He's making the case as to why there's value to it. And I think, and it's still leaving a lot of hybrid work environment models open. I do think, again, I've worked remotely for over 15 years almost of my career, right? And worked in an office for all the years before that. And I understand a bit of where he's coming from. So I think I'm going to be the contrarian in this conversation. And I get that he's an easy punching bag for this conversation about, what do you mean telling people they got to come into work? But the idea is that Zoom's a great tool for what it's good for, which is communicating, connecting people on that sort of regular day-to-day business. But there are those things that require still face-to-face. I know our team works remotely, and we try desperately. It's really hard sometimes when we're busy. We try desperately to get together at least once a quarter with the business leaders, and at least once or twice a year with as many of the team members as we can. And in every virtual company I've ever worked in has made an effort that has done well, I should say. Every virtual company that I've worked in that's done well has made an effort to do those kind of personal get-togethers. And I do think we have to just remember that human beings need those connection points. And any good business owner should realize that's part of the business that they're trying to build. And that tool that is a powerful part of any business is best used for what it's best used for, right? Not just to say, well, all communications and all interactions can be done through Zoom. So that's my 2 cents on it. I mean, I get the irony of it. And when I'm a Gen Xer by heart, and irony is just built into my blood. But I do think that we got to give the guy a little bit of a break.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. I'm dyed-in-the-wool remote work for life sort of person, but I agree with you too. I find great value sometimes in collaborating. I think it depends on the type of work you do, and you have to find out what works. And sometimes you also have to do a little give and take, right? What works for you may not be what works best for the team or for the group. And some people need to have that. And I'm with that. That all makes sense to me. So, yeah, I think we'll agree to agree.
Two-way road, yeah. Well, Cliff, we've gotten through a lot today, but boy, it's been a busy week, and we're heading into a lot of upcoming events, aren't we?
Oh, so much. I know we're going to be, obviously, we mentioned HR Tech. That's the big one. If for whatever reason this is your first time listening, then please be there. Stacey will be giving the keynote on the 13th. I again cannot remember whether you are before or after Gina Davis, but it's right there. So when you think Gina Davis, think Stacey Harris, and you'll figure it out.
Thank you, Cliff. Now you made me smile. So yeah, we'll be at the HI. It'll be our keynote is October 13th, the Friday morning. So I realize that it's always tempting to stay up late and have a little bit of a little bit more partying fun the night before. But I think you're gonna not only is it going to be me. Right after me is going to be Brian Summers doing his presentation on HR technology and implementation work. And then right after that will be Jason Averbeck talking about how you create a better mega session on the experience platform market. And so I think if you haven't ever stayed over to Friday, because like you're a sales guy who's working on the floor, or if you work maybe one of the vendors, you didn't stay over to the next Friday, I think this might be the year to do it, because you're going to get not only some great brand new hot off the press information from our research at the morning keynote, then you'll also get 2 additional great sessions with Brian Summer and Jason Averbeck. We're also going to be at several other upcoming events that are going to be happening. Before that, there'll be an ADP analyst event in New York that I'm attending. Cliff, you're going to be, I think, at the OC Tanner event.
That's right. September 11th and 12th at Snowbird, very close to Salt Lake City. So obviously I'll be flying in and out. So if anyone wants to get in touch and they're in the Salt Lake City area, I'll make an appearance. Love to talk.
And then I'll be back the following week after that at Oracle Cloud World in Las Vegas. So if anybody's going to be at the Oracle Cloud World event and would like to touch base, let me know. And then the week after that, I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time at Workday Rising. I'll be running a skills workshop on that Tuesday afternoon. And then I think we'll be at the event for the analyst things. So a very busy September. If you guys are anywhere in the Las Vegas, Utah, you said, right? Or San Francisco area.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Then please let us know. We're really excited about being able to catch up with some of you. So, and on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up. So I know Cliff's puppy dogs are due for a vet visit, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll put pictures in the show notes. Everyone wants to see pictures of the puppy.
So be sure, if information about the keynote or what you're doing, go to our website and get some more information. You can also sign up for our newsletter there, and you find out more details about where we'll be speaking. You'll also find our new HR in Action report, how SMBs are using HR technologies to thrive as well, and our full annual HR systems survey white paper as well there on our website. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast on the opposite week of this, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by CEO Terry Zipper. And then I'd also, if you're interested in supporting that podcast as well as our Spilling the Tea on HR Tech here that Cliff and I do each and every other week, please be sure to support the podcast by subscribing and leaving a rating and review where you grab your podcast. Those reviews make all the difference to us and to the people who are downloading the podcast. To stay up to date on immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and now on Instagram, I think, as well. And again, thanks, Cliff, for, as always, putting together some of the great topics for us to talk about this week. Thank you to our Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by their amazing founder, Kelly. Thanks to our marketing team, Lisa Renko and Summer, who have been amazing and sort of continuing to pull this together, getting it out and putting it out to the market. And most importantly, thanks to our listeners and the community of the HR and HR technology environments. We couldn't do this without you. Please be sure to share with us anything you're interested in hearing about on a week-to-week basis. And that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR tech updates and insights just for you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.